Thank you so much, Mark. I am delighted to be here.
The thing that you do that I absolutely love is this idea of, and I'm going to understate it so that you can explain it more, right?
Okay.
Is that you come in and a family might engage you to come and sit with grandma or grandpa or an elder, and you then have a conversation with them and you draw rather than doing a video to record things, which we've heard of. There's lots of those kind of services, but you actually draw out these stories. And that just really intrigued me because I'm a visual scribe, so I constantly drawing. So when I heard about that, and having just had our grandmother pass away at 102, my job was like getting the stories. I want to hear the stories from New York and the Bronx and all of that. So did I get close, Jill?
Absolutely. And I want to say a lot of people think that it is really just people that are much older, meaning their 70s, their 80s, or they're contemplating the end of their life. But what we've found, those of us that do this work, is that it's people in their 50s or their 60s, and it's really towards their future. And surprisingly, and this is the golden nugget in all of this, is that in thinking about your mortality, you often appreciate your daily life so much more.
How tell me this story. There was a moment when you, like, because you were an educator, and there was some, like, tell us, what was that? Was it a coffee? Was it a book? How did you get inspired?
So how this all came together, you're right. I am an educator by background. I'm also a visual practitioner. So I love to draw, as you do. You talk about being a visual scribe. I'm a graphic facilitator. So I use hand-drawn illustrations and text to listen and draw people's stories. And so that was where this all started. It was at a conference from the International Forum of Visual Practitioners. I heard from a colleague in Thailand.
Hold it just a second.
Okay, sorry.
You all have a trade show?
We have an annual
people
conference.
Who draw? No
Yes,
kidding.
absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
And not just here it's based in the US. It is an international organization. There's another one in Europe also.
Wow.
And so there are people all over the world who
Wow.
are visual practitioners of varying kinds. It was at one of these conferences in 2020. So COVID, we're all online. And a colleague from Thailand had told us her story of training volunteers in hospitals to listen to patients' stories and to share those visual stories with the medical team to enhance communication. And so that became really the jumping off point for me to get involved with people that had been talking about this a little earlier, but that's when we started to gel. A number of us were at this session, we were excited by it. And so we took it from there.
There's, I'm sure you could tell us a lot of stories. Because my TED talk was called "See What You Think." So I'm enmeshed, but my job isn't doing that. But I know that when I'm talking with someone at a coffee shop, did it this morning, I have my pad with me and I draw what I'm hearing them say, because I need to see it for it to make sense to me. But then often they'll say, "Can I take a picture of that? Because that's the first time I saw it." So what's that reaction like from people?
I have to say it's a total experience. So if I can back up just a little and explain how we get there. And so what we've developed over the past few years is a process where we really believe that we're creating a special environment and a sacred space for people to step into and do this work. And so people need to be prepared, because we're talking about our mortality. And so it is not only those of us that draw that can do this, it is drawing plus. It's the ability to understand, what are people thinking of? What are their wishes, hopes, and dreams? What are their worries? How do they want to envision their future? And so we prepare people in advance for being with us in the moment. We all, in our own practices, or when we come together as a group, we listen deeply to what people are saying and have a guided conversation with key questions that gets them, it's a spark really for them to consider, Where do I want to be? Who do I want to be with? And we really take it from there, and it unfolds, and we're drawing simultaneously.
Right.
And so when we are
that's the magic, isn't it?
Totally, absolutely. Yeah. And so we know things though in advance though. For instance, what colors are important to you? What iconography might be important? What's important in your life? And so we're thinking of all of those things, and then that becomes the mix that ends up being this drawing and then is shared. And for me, I'm an educator and a communicator.
What did you teach?
I taught children with special education needs from the time they were 6 months old in one setting all the way to graduate school. Wow. And so I understand, just like you do, the importance of engaging people completely, visually, auditorily, kinesthetically, and then sharing that information. And so there's also this opportunity, once a drawing has been created, this graphic recording of what they have said, to check in. Is this correct? Were any mistakes made? Was anything important left out? Do you want to add something to this, something else that has occurred to you? And so to work through that, to make any additions or changes, and then to talk about the other piece, because this is part of the entire experience, is you have this and you were prepared to be here. When you take it to your family or your close circle of friends, how will you prepare them to listen to what you have to say? Because these are the critical conversations, and they don't happen just once. They happen over time because we grow and change in our lives. Some of our ideas might change. I mean, the reality is in our country, the laws are different in every state with regard to the final disposition of bodies. How do you want to be at rest? In what way? And so even in New York, we have changes coming right now in every state, and that influences what is possible. And so someone's picture may change, their drawing may change over time, and this is the basis for a conversation.
I found in preparing for the talk with Jeremy, because he had a glioblastoma and he knew he had, we had him actually scheduled, and they said, we really need to move that up because he only has a few days left. And his acceptance and his joy was stunning. We could just have a normal talk, like this is like a normal thing. And so I'm guessing that you have to kind of be that matter-of-fact person in the conversation, like the straight man, if you will, the straight person in the conversation. Am I right?
Yeah. And so we're compassionately caring.
Okay, there you go.
And so it is a curiosity that comes out of essentially being very closely aligned with the person that we're working with. Meaning we're not curious for us. We want to know what resonates for them. So it's not our agenda, it's their agenda. And we're willing to be a guide, if that is helpful to begin with, and then to go in different directions. And so I think you raised a really important point, which is when we start to talk about our mortality, when we appreciate our days every day, because we have handled such big issues, we are at greater ease.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack here. I'm in the business of asking questions. You're in the business of drawing answers.
Yes.
Right. And I collect questions because questions to me are very, very interesting. What's your favorite question to ask?
It's a tough question to answer, Mark, because I think in terms of the total experience that I'm providing and what I see as key areas, for me, it's really, before you even step into this experience, imagine the best possible, knowing that that's what we can hope and wish for. Plans may change over time, but what does that look like? All right. And so then there are pieces to that, meaning where will you be? Who will you be with? What environment do you want to have? What's the music you want to listen to? What sense do you want to be there? What environment will you create for your visitors? How will you invite people in? At the final laying of...
So are you talking about literally the last days, the last hours?
The last weeks to the last days, absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah. And for
I
some people, it's, I want to be at home. For other
mm,
people, it's I want to be at my cabin, that we've been going to for 20 years.
I had the pleasure of cooking for a woman who had 4 months, and she said, and her intention was to be in her living room, beautiful home, and her friends flew in from all over the country. Every time I went over to bring soup to her, she was surrounded by people. So I could imagine the drawing of her just having conversations with people. And
Absolutely.
in that, do you do one drawing or do you do a series of drawings?
And so in the past, up until this point, it has been one drawing, but there's the preparation that happens before, there's the experience during, and then there is the follow-up or continuing conversation that can happen.
Interesting.
Because you're opening up a lot for a family.
Right. Yeah, I bet.
And so it's not only, and this can be a rather difficult question. And so I always hesitate a little when I ask, and yet I think it's important, is who do you want to be with you? And who might you not want to be with you?
And I bet you there isn't anybody else who can actually ask that question.
Well, it is certainly easier for me as a compassionate listener.
Yeah. Well, what is I just imagine, I think we all in as we're listening to this can imagine how that could have helped in a situation. What tell us a story about a big surprise you had.
A big surprise. Gosh, that's a really good question, because having done this for several years and really working to craft the experience to make it comfortable, I think it is actually the feeling of peace and calm every time our drawing is complete and our conversations are complete. The gratitude experienced by people because they feel so deeply heard.
Yeah.
And while I'd like to say that's not a surprise, but in our very fast-paced world, sometimes we're just not attending. And this is their moment. All right. This is their time.
100%.
Yeah.
What's the youngest you've done?
So it was probably a woman in her 50s, I would say. And it's been women in their 50s and 60s for the most part. It hasn't been people in their 70s and 80s. And I will say this is slightly different. Sometimes I talk with people about creating visual obituaries, and everyone assumes that's people also when they're in, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And yet talking with a group of medical students in their 20s and 30s, they were totally into the process because it's a sharing of their memories. It's a life review. We take out the word, we can use it because it's commonly used, but the word obituary, or there's some language that we need to put aside so it doesn't become an impediment to the conversation.
When when someone contacts you, what's the question that they ask? There's always, okay, I'm going to get that one. I'm going to get that one. I'm going to get that one. Right. I know it's almost like you're frequently asked questions.
Sure.
What's the question that you're like, oh yeah, that was the one?
Well, it is rare that people come in together as couples, right? And not to do the conversation together, but to do it separately, because then you are starting to think about, what is this person revealing to me that they may not have shared with their partner, that they may not have even thought through for themselves? So it's not that they haven't shared purposefully, although that could be the case, but it's like, I haven't thought about that.
Mm-hmm. It feels extreme. I think you said in the very beginning, it is like you're holding space for this to happen. And I think you used the word sacred space, because I think as we think about transitioning and we're coming to grips with all of that, but now here's another human who's chronicling that and drawing. So have you been an artist your entire life?
I have not. Really, probably. And that's the beauty of it, because actually I was just talking with a colleague about this yesterday. We were sitting in the courtyard of MoMA talking about, well, are we artists or are we communicators? And I am from the world of being a communicator. This is a communication tool. So my work, I like my work. Do I think it's art? No. Do I think it tells a story that's so important to tell, like art in some way? Yes.
Wow. As you say storytelling, it makes me think of one of the elements in great storytelling. If you do screenwriters and things like this, is there's an objective, but then there's an obstacle that they have to get over to reach the objective. How do you deal with capturing the objective, but also kind of the struggle?
I am a typical New Yorker, and I'm going to own that right now, in that I'm kind of fast paced. And
Okay.
I need to prepare for doing this work, to pause just a little longer than would be my inclination, because we're asking deep questions that may have been thought of initially, but in this environment with other questions being asked, maybe we're going deeper, maybe we're going someplace else. And so I think that's the piece of it.
You've given us a lot to think about, Jill. I hope people listening to this will think about those in their life that they might want to investigate. We have all the examples of your work, on the site so that they can see it. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.